Well, dear friends, it's hearty and warm welcome as usual. Dear friends, in our today's lecture, we are going to learn little bit about the synapse and different characteristic features, special features of nerve fiber. So first of all, let us talk briefly. What is synapse? Friends, let me tell you that this term synapse was first of all proposed by a British physiologist, namely Sir Charles Sherrington, and he is a Nobel laureate for neuron to neuron contact also. So first of all, you just remember that the term synapse was first of all proposed by a British physiologist, that is Sir Charles Sherrington. Now come to the meaning of this term. What is synapse? Friends, already we have studied about the structure of neuron. Okay, let me draw here a little diagram of multipolar neuron. Consider, here is supposed to be a multipolar neuron. We know that it consists of a cell body, that is nothing but the cyton, and from cyton it arises two different types of processes such as the dendron and dendrites, here I am going to show, and a single elongated process, that is nothing but the axon. Okay, so here are the dendrites and here is axon. Now we have already learned that axon, it terminates into few branches, also known as oligodendrites, and the terminal end of these oligodendrites show a small bulb-like structure, may be known as synaptic bulb or axonic bulb. Here I have shown one multipolar neuron. Now let us consider, here is supposed to be another neuron. Once again I am going to show its cyton, here is the axon, and these are the dendrites of this another neuron. Now please look at the diagram. Here in this diagram you just notice, here is the terminal branch of axon and here is the dendron of another neuron. Now simply the junction of two neurons may be known as synapse. I am going to tell you what is synapse. Synapse is nothing but simply it is the junction of two neurons. In the diagram you can notice दोन न्यूरॉन्स, दोन नर्व सेल्स, दोन चेतापेशी ज्या ठिकाणी एकमेकांच्या अतिशय जवळ सान्निध्यात आलेले असतात त्यांच्या जंक्शनला सिनॅप्स असं म्हटलं जातं. और सिनॅप्स कॅन बी डिफाइन्ड इन अनदर वे. सिनॅप्सची दुसरी एक व्याख्या केली जाते, दॅट आय एम गोइंग टू टेल यू. दॅट सिनॅप्स, इट इज द क्लोज प्रॉक्सिमिटी, it is the close vicinity or close nearness of the axon of one neuron, and dendron of another neuron, with a very small microscopic gap may be known as synaptic cleft of 200 angstrom only. I am going to repeat once again the definition or meaning of synapse. Synapse ची व्याख्या आणि अर्थ पुन्हा मी एकदा सांगतोय. I said that synapse, it is the close proximity or close vicinity or close nearness of axon of one neuron and dendron or dendrite, maybe sometime cyton, maybe sometime axon of another neuron with a very microscopic gap of 200 angstrom. That gap is called as the synaptic cleft and this region is known as the synapse. मराठीतून एकदा सांगतो. ज्या वेळेला एका न्यूरॉनच्या एक्झॉन आणि दुसऱ्या न्यूरॉनचं डेंड्राइट असेल किंवा दुसऱ्या न्यूरॉनचं सायटॉन असेल किंवा दुसऱ्या न्यूरॉनचा एक्झॉन असेल, हे एकमेकांच्या अत्यंत जवळ आलेले असतात, सान्निध्यात असतात आणि त्या दोघांमध्ये फक्त 200 अँगस्ट्रॉम इतकी सूक्ष्म अशी गॅप असते. त्यावेळेला त्या रिजनला सिनॅप्स असं म्हटलं जातं. मग या ठिकाणी दोन वेगवेगळ्या व्याख्या सांगितल्या. फर्स्ट डेफिनेशन आय सेड दॅट द जंक्शन ऑफ two neurons is known as synapse, or another more detailed definition that synapse, it is the close proximity or close nearness of axon of one neuron and dendrite, or sometimes cyton, or sometimes axon of another neuron with a little gap of 200 angstrom, that is synaptic cleft. This region is known as the synapse. Actually, in the synapse, two neurons are involved. Now here in this diagram, the neuron which transmit electric impulse, nerve impulse towards the synapse is known as presynaptic neuron. Presynaptic neuron. Pre, stands for the before. Presynaptic, सिनॅप्सच्या आधी असलेला न्यूरॉन, but it is better to say the transmitting neuron. It means the neuron which conducts the electric impulse, nerve impulse towards the synapse is known as the presynaptic neuron. While the another neuron, that is receiving neuron, or the neuron which conducts that electric impulse away from the synapse is known as postsynaptic neuron. Postsynaptic neuron. याचा अर्थ सिनॅप्स कडे विद्युत संवेदना, नर्व इम्पल्स कॅरी करणाऱ्या न्यूरॉनला प्रीसिनॅप्टिक न्यूरॉन असं म्हणतात आणि सिनॅप्स पासून ती विद्युत संवेदना, तो नर्व इम्पल्स दूर वाहून नेणाऱ्या न्यूरॉनला पोस्टसिनॅप्टिक न्यूरॉन असं म्हणतात. Now here we have understood the definition or meaning of synapse. Now we have to study different special characteristic features of the neuron or nerve fiber. So let us move to that topic. Special properties of nerve fiber or neuron. Let us talk one by one each. First property, that is excitability or irritability. In 11th we people have studied that irritability may be known as the sensitivity, संवेदनशीलता. Now here, as far as concerned with the neuron, what is excitability? Let me explain you. Excitability, it is the ability shown by neuron or nerve fiber to generate an electric impulse after receiving stimulus by altering the normal electric potential difference across its plasma membrane. कदाचित ही व्याख्या आपल्याला थोडीशी अवघड जाईल. We shall discuss about it later on once again. Temporarily I want to tell you, in any nerve fiber or neuron, consider here is supposed to be the plasma membrane of that nerve fiber, and in normal condition, resting condition, unexcited condition means when that nerve fiber is not conducting the nerve impulse. ज्या वेळेला ती चेतापेशी किंवा चेतातंतू विद्युत संवेदनेचं वहन करत नसेल, म्हणजेच तो चेतातंतू, ती चेतापेशी ही एक्साइटेड अवस्थेत नसेल, अनएक्साइटेड असेल, at that time along the outer surface of the plasma membrane of that neuron or nerve fiber there is presence of positive charge, and along the inner surface of its plasma membrane there is a presence of negative charge. Now whenever the nerve fiber or neuron receives stimulus, ज्यावेळेला हा नर्व फायबर कुठल्याही प्रकारची संवेदना स्वीकारतो, at that time it occurs alteration, it occurs modification or change in the electric potential difference across the plasma membrane of that nerve fiber, and this is nothing but the excitation, this is nothing but the generation of an electric impulse, and this ability is known as excitability. याचा अर्थ ज्या वेळेला या नर्व फायबरला विशिष्ट अशा प्रकारची संवेदना प्राप्त होते त्यावेळेला या ठिकाणी प्लाझ्मा मेम्ब्रेनच्या दोन्ही बाजूला असलेले जे विद्युत प्रभार आहेत, पॉझिटिव्ह आणि निगेटिव्ह चार्जेस आहेत, किंवा प्लाझ्मा मेम्ब्रेनवर असलेला जो इलेक्ट्रिक पोटेन्शियल डिफरन्स आहे त्याच्यामध्ये बदल होतो आणि त्या ठिकाणी विद्युत संवेदना म्हणजेच इलेक्ट्रिक इम्पल्स किंवा नर्व इम्पल्स तयार होतो. सो सिम्पली दिस ॲबिलिटी टू जनरेट an electric impulse after receiving stimulus by altering the electric potential difference across the plasma membrane is known as excitability or irritability. Now come to the second special property, that is conductivity. Conductivity. Just now I told you that whenever nerve fiber or neuron receives particular stimulus, it occurs change in its electric potential difference and electric impulse is generated. Now this electric impulse generated at the site of stimulation is carried rapidly along the length of neuron, along the length of nerve fiber as a wave. This ability is known as conductivity. It means conductivity is nothing but simply it is the ability shown by nerve fiber or neuron to transmit the electric impulse along its length in a particular direction. Come to the third, stimulus. What is stimulus? संवेदना म्हणजे काय? Stimulus means it is any detectable physical, chemical, electrical change either in external environment or internal environment. I am going to repeat. I said that stimulus, संवेदना म्हणजे काय? Any detectable either physical, chemical or electrical change in external environment or internal environment which can bring about the excitation, which can bring about excitation of nerve or nerve fiber or muscle or organ or organism. This is nothing but the stimulus. Now there are three different aspects of the stimulus, such as first, threshold stimulus. Let me tell you, it is the minimum force of stimulus which can bring about excitation of nerve fiber. I am going to repeat once again. Threshold stimulus means it is the minimum force of stimulus which can bring about excitation of nerve. याचा अर्थ कमीत कमी संवेदनेचा, याचा अर्थ कमीत कमी तीव्रतेची संवेदना की जी एक्साइटेशन घडून आणू शकते, जी नर्व इम्पल्स जनरेट करू शकते. सो such type of stimulus which has the minimum force but then and then it has ability to generate an electric impulse is known as threshold stimulus. अशी संवेदना की जिची तीव्रता ही कमीत कमी असून सुद्धा ती विद्युत संवेदना जनरेट करू शकत असेल, जर नर्व फायबर मध्ये एक्साइटेशन घडून आणू शकत असेल तर अशा प्रकारच्या स्टिम्युलसला थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस असं म्हणतात. नाउ सेकंड आस्पेक्ट इज सब लिमिनल स्टिम्युलस. It may be known as sub-threshold stimulus or simply known as weak stimulus. Name itself indicates that it is the stimulus with less intensity. It is the stimulus with less force than the threshold stimulus, and thus it cannot generate an electric impulse. It cannot produce excitation in that nerve fiber. अर्थात ज्या स्टिम्युलसची तीव्रता, ज्या संवेदनेची तीव्रता ही थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा कमी आहे आणि त्यामुळे अशा स्टिम्युलसमुळे, अशा संवेदनेमुळे नर्व फायबर मध्ये एक्साइटेशन होऊ शकत नाही, इलेक्ट्रिक इंपल्स जनरेट होऊ शकत नाही. And that's why actually it is known as the weak stimulus, or it may be known as the subthreshold stimulus. Come to the third aspect, that is supraliminal stimulus. It may be known as suprathreshold stimulus, or simply known as the strong stimulus. Now, it is the stimulus which has intensity higher than the threshold stimulus. Listen carefully. The stimulus which has force, which has intensity more than the threshold stimulus, but then and then it can generate the electric impulse of the same degree like that of threshold stimulus. हे लक्षात घेण्यासारखं आहे. याचा अर्थ जी संवेदना ही थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा अधिक तीव्र आहे, ज्या स्टिम्युलसची इंटेन्सिटी थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा जास्त आहे, तरी सुद्धा अशा प्रकारचा स्टिम्युलस हा एक्साइटेशन तेवढ्याच तीव्रतेचं जनरेट करतो ज्या तीव्रतेने थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस हा एक्साइटेशन किंवा इलेक्ट्रिक इंपल्स जनरेट करू शकतो. So here I told you the meaning of stimulus, and there are three aspects. Let me tell you briefly once again that stimulus, samvedana, nothing but simply it is any change, any physical, chemical, electrical change in the external environment or internal environment of an organism, and it is responsible for the generation of electric impulse or excitation. Then threshold stimulus means what? It is the minimum force of stimulus which can generate excitation. Subliminal or weak stimulus means it is the stimulus which has less intensity than the threshold stimulus, and thus it cannot generate an electric impulse. And supraliminal stimulus, strong stimulus means it is the stimulus which has intensity, which has force more than the threshold stimulus, but it can generate electric impulse of the same degree like that of threshold stimulus. Now come to the next term, summation. Just now I told you that the stimulus which has intensity less than the threshold stimulus is not able to generate excitation, not able to generate an electric impulse. म्हणजे ज्या संवेदनेची तीव्रता ही थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा कमी आहे, अशी संवेदना त्या न्यूरॉन किंवा नर्व फायबर मध्ये एक्साइटेशन किंवा इलेक्ट्रिक इंपल्स, विद्युत संवेदना तयार करू शकत नाही. But a series of such sub-threshold stimuli, listen, series of sub-threshold stimuli, if applied repeatedly, then it can generate action potential, it can generate excitation, it can generate an electric impulse, and this additive effect shown by series of sub-threshold stimuli in the form of generation of an electric impulse is simply known as summation. Let me explain you in detail. Consider once again, here is a nerve fiber, and this nerve fiber is in resting condition. कल्पना करा की या ठिकाणी हा नर्व फायबर आहे, चेतातंतू आहे, हा रेस्टिंग कंडिशनला आहे, अनएक्साइटेड आहे, आणि या नर्व फायबरला आपण सब थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस अप्लाय केला, याचा अर्थ वीक स्टिम्युलस अप्लाय केला. ऑब्वियसली त्याचं एक्साइटेशन होणार नाही, त्या नर्व फायबर मध्ये विद्युत संवेदना जनरेट होणार नाही, ॲक्शन पोटेन्शियल जनरेट होणार नाही, तो एक्साइट होणार नाही. बट अ सिरीज ऑफ सब थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलाई इफ अप्लाइड रिपीटेडली अँड रॅपिडली, मात्र असे सब थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलाई जर एका पाठोपाठ एक कंटिन्यूज अप्लाय केले तर इट कॅन जनरेट इलेक्ट्रिक पोटेन्शियल, इट कॅन जनरेट एक्साइटेशन इन दॅट नर्व फायबर. आणि त्यामुळे त्या ठिकाणी असंख्य सब थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलायचा जणू एक ॲडिटिव्ह इफेक्ट म्हणून विद्युत संवेदनेची निर्मिती होते. याला म्हटलं जातं समेशन. ओके, नाउ कम टू द नेक्स्ट प्रॉपर्टी, ऑल or none principle. Listen, the stimuli below threshold level, the sub-threshold stimuli, that is subliminal stimuli or weak stimuli cannot generate excitation of nerve fiber, and all the stimuli above the threshold level, above the intensity than threshold stimulus can generate excitation of same degree. This is known as all or none principle. I am going to repeat once again. The stimuli which has less intensity, less force than the threshold stimulus, it means the subliminal stimuli, weak stimuli, sub-threshold stimuli cannot generate electric impulse, cannot generate excitation, but all the stimuli which has high intensity than the threshold stimulus generate excitation of the same degree. This is known as either all or none. आपल्याला कळलं असेल. याचा अर्थ थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा किंचितही कमी तीव्रता असलेली संवेदना जर नर्व फायबरला अप्लाय केला तर त्या ठिकाणी कुठल्याही प्रकारचं एक्साइटेशन होत नाही, कुठल्याही प्रकारची विद्युत संवेदना नर्व फायबर मध्ये जनरेट होत नाही. मात्र थ्रेशोल्ड स्टिम्युलस पेक्षा कितीही जास्त तीव्रतेचे स्टिम्युलाई अप्लाय केले तरी त्या सगळ्यांमुळे निर्माण होणारं एक्साइटेशन सेम डिग्रीचं असतं. This is called all or none principle. Now come to the next, that is refractory period. Refractory period. Refractory period means it is a very short time interval during which neuron or nerve fiber fails to respond to the second stimulus, though it is strong stimulus or though its intensity is above threshold stimulus. I am going to repeat once again that the refractory period means it is a very short time interval during which the neuron nerve fiber fails to respond to the second stimulus, though that second stimulus is strong enough. Okay, now why this is so? Let me explain you. Consider, suppose to be here is a nerve fiber. I have already told you when the nerve fiber or neuron is in resting condition, that is unexcited state, at that time along the external surface of plasma membrane of nerve fiber there is a continuous positive charge, and along the inner surface there is a continuous negative charge. Now this condition is known as polarized condition, or such nerve fiber is said to be in polarized state. Now whenever the nerve fiber receives any particular stimulus, at that time I have told you it occurs change, modification, alteration in the electric potential difference across the plasma membrane. It is known as the excitation. It is nothing but the generation of electric impulse, and that electric impulse is conducted along the length of nerve fiber. It means that as soon as the nerve fiber receives any particular stimulus, there is a reversal of polarity. It means there is a development of negative charge along the external surface of nerve fiber and positive charge along the internal surface of nerve fiber. And this electric impulse, this excitation is carried, conducted along the length of nerve fiber in the form of wave, what we call as actually the nerve impulse, electric impulse. But immediately if second stimulus is applied, अर्थात या ठिकाणी पहिला स्टिम्युलस दिल्यानंतर त्या ठिकाणी त्या नर्व फायबरचं एक्साइटेशन झालं, नर्व इम्पल्स, इलेक्ट्रिक इम्पल्स जनरेट झाला, तो नर्व इम्पल्स, तो इलेक्ट्रिक इम्पल्स हा पुढे कॅरी केला जातो, कंडक्ट केला जातो इन द फॉर्म ऑफ वेव्ह. मात्र एक्साइटेशन झाल्यानंतर लगेच जर दुसरा स्टिम्युलस दिला तर त्या ठिकाणी पुन्हा दुसरा इलेक्ट्रिक इम्पल्स जनरेट होत नाही. There is a little time, there is a very short time interval. After that short time interval, again it occurs the generation of second nerve impulse. Again it occurs the excitation of nerve fiber. It means after the excitation of nerve fiber, there is a short time interval of inexcitability. Why this is so? Because after first excitation, that nerve fiber shows again polarity. याचा अर्थ नर्व फायबरला एक स्टिम्युलस मिळाल्यानंतर त्या ठिकाणी नर्व इम्पल्स जनरेट होतो. It occurs the reversal of polarity. But after the propagation of that nerve impulse, again it occurs the repolarization. It means there is again a development of positive charge along the external surface and negative charge along the internal surface. We can say it is a sort of recovery, and therefore for this recovery it requires a little time. That is nothing but the recovery time, or it may be known as the refractory period. It is very short, simply of 1 millisecond. It means this refractory period or recovery time is of 1 by 1000 second. Very short. So here we have understood what is refractory period. Once again, refractory period is nothing but it is a very short time interval during which neuron or nerve fiber fails to respond second stimulus, though that second stimulus is strong enough. Now come to the next, synaptic delay. Now what is synapse? We all are very well known. I have already told you that synapse is nothing but the junction of two neurons, or synapse, it is the place where there is a close vicinity, close proximity of axon of one neuron and dendrite of another neuron. Let me tell you once again. Consider here is supposed to be the distal end of axon of one neuron, and here is a presence of a synaptic bulb. I will say it is the axon of presynaptic neuron. हा axon presynaptic neurons आहे आणि म्हणून या सिनॅप्टिक बल्बचं हे जे मेम्ब्रेन आहे याला मी म्हणेल presynaptic membrane. And here is supposed to be the dendrite or dendron of another neuron. आपण असं कल्पना करू की या ठिकाणी हा postsynaptic neuron आहे. This is postsynaptic neuron and it is supposed to be the dendrite of this postsynaptic neuron. So this is nothing but the postsynaptic membrane. We know that at the junction of two neurons there is microscopic gap of 200 Angstrom, which is also known as synaptic cleft. Well, now let me tell you what does it mean, synaptic delay. Synaptic delay means the transmission of nerve impulse across the synapse is slightly slower than the transmission of nerve impulse along the length of neuron. Try to understand. We know that nerve fiber or neurons are responsible for the transmission or conduction of nerve impulses. No doubt. आपल्या सगळ्यांना माहिती आहे की न्यूरॉन्स किंवा नर्व फायबर्स हे विद्युत संवेदना नर्व इम्पल्सची वाहतूक करत असतात. But I said here, whenever it occurs, the transmission or conduction of that nerve impulse across the synapse, it occurs slightly slower than the conduction of nerve impulse along the length of nerve fiber. याचा अर्थ नर्व फायबर मार्फत केल्या जाणाऱ्या नर्व इम्पल्सच्या ट्रान्समिशन किंवा कंडक्शनचा जो रेट आहे, जी गती आहे, त्याच्यापेक्षा मात्र तो नर्व इम्पल्स ज्या वेळेला सिनॅप्स मधून हा क्रॉस होतो किंवा सिनॅप्स मधून कंडक्ट होतो, at that time this transmission of nerve impulse occurs quite slow. This is known as synaptic delay. Now question arises, why this is so? Because during the transmission of nerve impulse across the synapse, it requires time for the release of neurotransmitter from this synaptic bulb. We shall study it later on again. पण तात्पुरता असं लक्षात ठेवा की ज्या वेळेला इकडे विद्युत संवेदना सिनॅप्स कडे येत असते त्यावेळेला या ठिकाणी सिनॅप्टिक बल्ब मध्ये असणारे काही वेसिकल्स हे न्यूरोट्रान्समीटर एक विशिष्ट प्रकारचे केमिकल हे रिलीज करत असतात इनटू दिस सिनॅप्टिक क्लेफ्ट. मग हे सिनॅप्टिक क्लेफ्ट मध्ये न्यूरोट्रान्समीटर रिलीज होण्यासाठी वेळ लागतो. It requires time for the diffusion of that neurotransmitter in the synaptic cleft as well as the action of that neurotransmitter on the postsynaptic membrane. Do you understand? I said that the synaptic delay is due to the time required for the release of neurotransmitter, diffusion of that neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft and action of that neurotransmitter on the postsynaptic membrane. And that's why I repeatedly told you synaptic delay means the transmission of electric impulse occur slightly slower across the synapse than along the nerve fiber. And this synaptic delay is near about half millisecond. Come to the next property, synaptic fatigue. Actually, we people might have learned this term fatigue. Mostly it is used as far as concerned with the muscles. Fatigue means temporary loss in the irritability or sensitivity of muscles, called as the muscle fatigue. अर्थात मसल फटीग याचा अर्थ असा होतो की जरी मसल्सला संवेदना प्राप्त झाल्या तरी सुद्धा काही काळाकरता ते मसल्स त्या संवेदनेला प्रतिसाद देत नाहीत. आपण त्याला सर्वसाधारण टायर्डनेस असं म्हणतो. बट फटीग मीन्स ॲक्च्युअली द टेम्पररी लॉस इन द इरिटॅबिलिटी, टेम्पररी लॉस इन द सेन्सिटिव्हिटी. नाउ हियर इज द सिनॅप्टिक फटीग. मीन्स व्हॉट? Due to the repeated stimulation, it may deplete the neurotransmitter. It may deplete the rate of secretion of neurotransmitter. And as the secretion of neurotransmitter get depleted, hence there is no chance of transmission of nerve impulse across the synapse. It means there is no excitation of the postsynaptic membrane, there is no conduction of nerve impulse from presynaptic membrane to the postsynaptic membrane. It means temporarily for few seconds the nerve impulses cannot be conducted across the synapse. This is known as the synaptic fatigue. Going to explain once again. I said that due to repeated stimulation, पुन्हा पुन्हा सातत्याने संवेदना प्राप्त झाल्यामुळे काही वेळेला या ठिकाणी या सिनॅप्टिक बल्ब मधून रिलीज होणारे जे न्यूरोट्रान्समीटर आहे त्याचं प्रमाण कमी होतं आणि मग न्यूरोट्रान्समीटर जर कमी प्रमाणात असेल, ही सिनॅप्टिक क्लेफ्ट जर न्यूरोट्रान्समीटर मुळे फुलफिल झाली नाही तर ऑब्वियसली पोस्ट सिनॅप्टिक मेम्ब्रेन पर्यंत विद्युत संवेदनेचं वहन होणार नाही आणि पोस्ट सिनॅप्टिक मेम्ब्रेन आणि पोस्ट सिनॅप्टिक न्यूरॉन हा एक्साइट होणार नाही. It means there is no further conduction or transmission of nerve impulse. This state is simply known as the synaptic fatigue. Come to the next, velocity of nerve impulse. Very simple. The rate of transmission of nerve impulse along the length of nerve fiber is known as velocity of nerve fiber. Rate of conduction, rate of transmission of electric impulse, nerve impulse along the length of nerve or nerve fiber is simply known as the velocity of electric impulse. Now this velocity is different. There is a variation. Say the velocity of nerve impulse is more in long and thick nerves. ज्या नर्व्स, ज्या चेता या थिक असतात आणि लॉंग असतात त्यांच्यामध्ये वेलोसिटी ऑफ नर्व इम्पल्स ही जास्त आहे. इट मीन्स देयर इज हाय रेट ऑफ कंडक्शन ऑफ नर्व इम्पल्स इन लॉंग अँड थिक नर्व्स. इन द सेम मॅनर वेलोसिटी ऑफ नर्व इम्पल्स इज मोर इन होमिओथर्म्स than poikilotherms. All of you are aware. Homeotherms means warm-blooded animals. Poikilotherms means cold-blooded animals. We know those animals who can maintain their constant body temperature despite of change in environmental temperature are called homeotherms. And poikilotherms means cold-blooded animals. The animals in which body temperature does not remain constant. It changes according to the change in environmental temperature. I said that the velocity of nerve impulse is more in homeothermic animals than poikilothermic animals. Also, the velocity of nerve impulse is high in voluntary nerve fibers than involuntary nerve fibers. Let me tell you, in voluntary nerve fibers, the velocity of nerve impulse is near about 100 to 200 meter per second, while in involuntary nerve fiber it is simply 10 to 20 meter per second. Also it is seen that the velocity of nerve impulse is very much high in medullated or myelinated nerve fibers and less in non-medullated or non-myelinated nerve fibers. So here we have discussed all the different special features of nerve fiber or neuron. Now we people have to discuss about the types of synapses, that is electric synapse and chemical synapse. That we shall learn in our next lecture. So let us stop here today. Thank you and bye.